4 stories of pain and loss. As you go up the stairs in this makeshift rehabilitation centre for sick and wounded Syrians in southern Turkey, every door discloses a different scene of broken lives. They're living now virtually without possessions in a foreign country. In London, Geneva and Istanbul, foreign statesmen and exiled Syrian politicians are arguing about how to end the war. But the rebellion started without them, and they won't decide when it ends. It's commanders in the field who will decide, commanders that politicians can't control, especially not Western politicians who refuse to arm them.
Very pleased to meet you.
Now, one of the top commanders is breaking free. Colonel Abdul Jabbar al-Aqadi has resigned as head of the Free Syrian Army in Aleppo and told Newsnight the West has betrayed his forces by doing a deal with President Assad to get rid of chemical weapons.
عندما يقول السيد باراك أوباما بأن الكيماوي خط أحمر.
When Mr. Obama says chemical weapons are a red line, that gives Assad a green light to use conventional weapons. Ballistic missiles, Scud missiles, fighter planes like MiGs and Sukhois, helicopters, rocket launchers and tanks. All these can be used by this regime to kill the Syrian people. So the Western stance has been very negative towards the Syrian revolution. As Syrians, we think the West is supporting the criminal Assad regime.
Colonel Aqadi is a man of the people. A professional soldier with the clipped moustache of a former regime officer, he fights alongside bearded volunteers. This summer he travelled south with the head of the Islamist Tawhid Brigade to defend the rebel-held town of Qusayr against Assad's forces. But Qusayr was eventually lost because the rebels weren't united and the regime, backed by Hezbollah fighters from Lebanon, was far better armed.
Of course, in terms of weapons and ammunition, we have not received anything at all. Some communications equipment, that's all, and some ready meals from the US.
How many ready meals?
I don't know, because the fighters refuse to eat them.
Now a new rebel lineup's being formed, including this senior commander who's travelled across the border to meet me. It's a lineup of Islamists. Some were in the Western-approved Free Syrian Army. Now they're talking of breaking away. Some want an Islamic caliphate in a future Syria. Muda Najjar is a former mobile phone salesman, now famous in northern Syria for his bravery, who lost the use of his hand to a regime bullet. He can't understand why foreign powers seem more worried by radical Islamism than by Assad's dictatorship.
Does the
world have double standards? Are they only interested in the length of somebody's beard? That's all the world sees, not the amount of blood that was spilt. But even if there is religious extremism in Syria, that's natural. We asked the world to help get rid of Assad, but no one listened. So we rely on God alone.
Would you be happy to fight with the extremists, with ISIS, if they were happy to fight with you?
No.
Yes, I'm ready to fight side by side with them to bring this regime down.
Western policy is based on the idea that there's a moderate mainstream in Syria, in between regime loyalists and radical Islamists. Among ordinary Syrians, there certainly is, but among rebel fighters, the distinctions are becoming increasingly blurred. Even Western diplomats admit that the groups they trust are now probably in a minority. And as more and more feel that the outside world is conspiring against them, the chances of a successful peace conference become ever slimmer.
I don't think it will succeed. While the regime continues to kill people, the Air Force bombs people from the air and directs artillery fire at them. I don't think under such circumstances anybody can go to negotiations or peace talks with such a criminal regime.
That's certainly how the wounded at the rehab centre feel. You might think their suffering would make them want an end to the war. In fact, it's made them all the more insistent that their victory should be complete.
Well, Tim Hewell is still in Turkey and joins us now. Tim, what are the rebels up to there?
Well, there are endless meetings going on among senior rebel commanders here in southern Turkey. Some people might wonder when they find the time for fighting. But there is a serious issue at stake, whether these senior rebels still have confidence in General Salim Idris. He's the head of the Free Syrian Army, which is backed politically by the West, or whether they want to break away into a new Islamist grouping, which might even be called the Army of Muhammad. Well, there are plenty of diplomats here, particularly the Qatari foreign minister, who are doing all they can to stop that because they fear that it would really reduce support and sympathy for the rebels still more.
Are they going to make it to the peace talks in Geneva?
Well, there are endless talks about that as well. In Istanbul, they'll be going on all weekend among exiled Syrian politicians. Politicians really, many of whom really lack, I'd say, credibility among the fighters on the ground, and maybe it's because they lack legitimacy that they're unlikely really to give any very clear answer, maybe for fear of appearing to stab in the back the people back home. I think at most they'll say, yes, they'll go, but only on impossible conditions that President Assad agrees beforehand to step down, which just isn't going to happen. There's been a huge amount of diplomatic effort to get these talks off the ground, but I certainly don't think it's going to bear fruit in the next few weeks.